Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Perspective. This is the show where we bring you perspective or different perspectives on an issue. And some of those issues are very dynamic. And of course, when we talk about dynamic issues, we talk about dynamic people and very especially dynamic women. My guest this morning is way above being dynamic. She's powerful and she is extremely strong. She's Martha Ngoye. She's an attorney of the High Court of South Africa and has practiced as a corporate lawyer. She worked for some of South Africa's big names in the legal field, such as Edward Nathan and Friedland, and she is a true trailblazer. Now, if you're wondering why I say that, all I'm saying to you is stick with me on this interview throughout the interview to see just what a strong woman she is and what a trailblazer she is. And she certainly is going to inspire other women watching us this morning, not forgetting the men and our young people as well. Martha Ngoye, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you too. And good morning to the viewers.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much.
I'm in awe. I'm absolutely in awe of your journey. We have amazing women and young people in our country, very especially post-apartheid, very especially during this time when we are rebuilding. Sad to say that our efforts at rebuilding are being possibly pushed back by very nefarious forces within the country, within the corporate world, within government, etc., etc. But we're going to get to that, to your story in a minute or two. Let's understand who is Martha Ngoye.
Well, Martha Ngoye was born in Soweto,
Okay.
Baragwanath Hospital, as it was then. And home is in Soweto, in Diepkloof. So that's why I grew up with both mom and dad and my siblings, and schooled here and went to varsity at UWC for my BProc degree. And thereafter, I went to Wits for my postgraduate degree. And then obviously that led into the profession
Articles,
of law.
etc.
Yes.
Okay, when did you realize, as young girls, we all have dreams about, when I grow up, I'm going to be this, that, or the other. Why did you decide on law?
I think I've always had that passion. The one thing I've always hated is injustice. And it was between law and psychology. So my drive has always been to help people that need assistance. And therefore, I've known for a very long time. And I think my dad, if he was alive, he would have, concurred with the fact that hard-headed as I was as a child, he knew very well that I would take up this particular field as a career. But that's what I've always wanted to do. I mean, even at matric, when I was at school, when I go back to the records, I look and I see that I've said I wanted to be a lawyer or a psychologist. I've always known it.
Wow. I'm trying to think, we all have that special person, that special moment in our lives, and we aspire to be like them, or, they inspire you in such a way by something that they might have said. It might even have been a teacher, or it might have been our parents or an aunt. And something they've said or done throughout their lives leaves a huge impression on us, and we grow up, aspiring to be that person or to be in that profession. Apart from the issue around injustice, and I'll come back to it in a minute or two, was there such a person in your life?
Well, I suppose my family, my mom and dad, the way we were brought up, instilled a culture and values that made me realize that with the hardship that they actually went through during those difficult years, they worked very hard, and believed, obviously, that raising us in the manner that they did and the sacrifices that they made for us would help us at least live better. And so, and they were not necessarily politicians or anything like that. My dad was a driver. My mom was a nurse. But those values that they instilled in us, really have, I think, led me to being who I am. There's other people as well. My bosses throughout work have really played a huge role with me, especially when I was doing my articles. My principal at the time, saw me and took me by the hand and told me that I could do it, even though I wasn't sure, especially because I was going into a commercial law firm. And, being a black child, we're not experienced and we're not exposed to that type of life. But he believed in me. And I've always aspired to be a very good lawyer and be as good as him.
Was he a white man?
He was a white man. He was a white Jewish man. His name is Michael Sosnovic. And I take great pride in telling anybody about him and how he really took me by the hand and showed me the ropes.
So he mentored you?
Yeah.
Are you still in contact with him today?
I am in contact with him still. In fact, I looked for him and I found him. And we reconnected, and it was amazing. It was as if, we'd just seen each other the other day.
Marvelous.
Yes.
As you were growing up, obviously we were just kind of transitioning from the dark days of apartheid, and we were now entering into this new democracy. I'm wondering how much of, all of that, the apartheid stigma, and just the way black people as a whole have been subjugated. Were you exposed to all of that? And what an impact it had made on you?
I was exposed to it. I mean, the 1976 riots, when they happened, I was in school. The 1986, the 10-year anniversary, when it happened, I experienced all that. I lived in the townships. And my parents decided to take me to a school, a Catholic school, which was in town. So the challenges that I had of having to acclimatize between township and also learning in an institution that was predominantly white, I had to balance those issues, because what I found also was that some of my friends' brothers were in the army. And they would go into the township in those hippo cars, right, and raid the streets. And we would be running around and running away from them. And I'd have to acclimatize when I go back to school.
And not even mention that at all.
It was a hell of an experience, and it was traumatic as well. But fortunately, the type of school that I went to allowed us to speak to these issues. And we would discuss them. And we were frank about them. To say, your brothers are in the township doing X. I go back to that very township where this chaos is happening. It was in the midst of the apartheid era. And when I realized the impact that this had on me, when I was working for Barclays, 2003, my boss took us to Mandela, the museum. There was this big yellow Mellow car that was parked there, and obviously just as an exposition. And when I saw it, I was traumatized. It brought back all those memories, even after so many years, of not having seen that car. But I relived the moment at that time, and I just couldn't be in there, just because of that specific experience.
I'm going to dwell on that a little more right after the ad break, and other memories that has impacted on you and possibly made you realize I've got to rise above all of this. And that is the reason why you're sitting here this morning talking with me. Of course, my guest is the amazing Martha Ngoye, and please stay watching and listening, because you're going to hear just how amazing this woman is, how she has risen up to fight against injustices of all kinds. We will get back to you right after the ad break, so please don't go away. Welcome back. On Perspective this morning, we are talking with Martha Ngoye. She is a whistleblower. And of course, we've been talking about her growing years, just to give you a taste of who she is, where she comes from, and what has driven her to the space she's in now. She's a woman of very high moral standing and believes in ethical governance. So we're going to start unpacking all of that in a minute or two, but let's hear a little more about her growing years, and then we'll talk about her whistleblowing experience, which, by the way, she is still in that space for now. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So you spoke about going on the school trip and seeing those Caspers, is that what they were called?
Caspers, yes. We call them hippos.
Hippos, there you
Yes,
go.
yeah.
What did you say to your classmates at the time that you couldn't carry on? You know, you couldn't go on with the tour?
It was not even classmates, it was working.
Ah, okay.
It was working environment. And you can imagine at the time, Barclays had just come back into the country, so the issues around apartheid, a lot of my colleagues were not aware of what had transpired. So the fact that I reacted the way that I did allowed us to actually speak about it, because they were then interested in what actually transpired and the experiences that we had through those years. Because I also couldn't believe the trauma. You know, it proved to me how long trauma can remain with you without you actually realizing that you're still living with it. Because I was triggered just like that, just by seeing that vehicle, that Casper, the yellow one. We called it the yellow mellow at the time. And it just triggered me. So, you know, a lot of my colleagues who, because Barclays also was, obviously, is an international company, we had a lot of foreign employees within the organization. And they were very keen and interested to know, who is this person, Martha? And where does she actually come from to have experienced, to have gone through that? Because it was immediate.
How did all of that shape you, knowing that people were interested enough, and these were not black people, these were not your own people, these were white people interested in your story? And did it make a difference to you, knowing that there's interest and maybe there'll be meaningful change in my life and the people that I interact with on a daily basis?
I think it's important to tell our story. And that opportunity given to me at the time, I valued it, because it made me realize that the organization I'm working for is interested, you know, in knowing also about the country that it's back in, and the people and the lives that we lived. So it gave me that comfort to know that I'm in the right institution. I'm working with the people who really have an interest and who want to make the difference, you know, because it was not just about coming in and just making money, you know. And I made a lot of impact also in the manner in which the organization dealt with certain laws, for instance, within the country, because it's not the same, obviously. The UK does things differently to us. And so I found myself having to educate, you know, a lot of the leaders within the organization about how to deal, for instance, with labor-related issues. So it became important, and I was listened to, you know, and my input was valued. Because I think it became clear that I just did not come from an environment, and I'd worked very hard to be where I am, considering the circumstances that I came from. So that gave me that courage to actually excel.
Your intuition told you that it was genuine on their
Yes.
part, it wasn't whitewashing.
No.
Because in the early days of the new dispensation, there was a lot of that.
Yes.
There was a lot of contrived support for black people,
Yes.
and speaking out for the black people and their rights, and that the subjugation of black people should stop, and it's all about equal opportunities and equalness between black, white, green, blue and yellow. So for you, it was a genuine effort on the part of the company you worked for.
Yes.
Just before we proceed, you talked about your parents moving you from a township school to a school in downtown Johannesburg.
In Rosebank, in fact, it was a Catholic school.
Okay. Recently we're hearing a lot about African children battling with comprehension at the grade 4 level, I think. And this has to do with the transition from their mother tongue into English. What are your thoughts on that? And did you have a similar situation? And if you did, how did you transcend it?
Well, I moved in 1979, so it was still in the heart of apartheid. And I think for me, what was important was at the time, the Catholic nuns had taken a stance to say, we are going to go against the norm and we are going to make a difference and allow black children into our schools. So I was a crop of one of the first black kids that went into that type of environment. And very few of us in the class, I mean, you could count 1 or 2 of us in the class at the time. The transition was something else. I had to repeat a standard because obviously what was thought was that the level of education that I was coming from was not at where I was going to, in terms of the peers that I was going to meet at school. So I repeated what was then standard 3, which is grade 5, I think now, and moved on from that perspective. But I actually didn't find that it was that difficult. I guess there's a difference now between the focus on education as it was then to what is happening now. I mean, I sat at a board of a school, also a Catholic school in Soweto, where it was more focused on the foundation phase of, the kids. And my concern was, how are we doing this? I mean, this is a critical phase where we need to be actually educating the kids better than what we're doing. So I think things have lapsed, in terms of the focus. I mean, you've realized what the government has also said around the percentage marks for passing and so on. And it will become difficult, when our kids move into higher learning institutions and so on. Because I'm not sure that the focus really on education really is there, even after the new dispensation.
So I'm not sure if the focus is on the right issues at all in any sphere, be it education, health, corporate governance, and the list goes on.
Yes.
That being said, then let's look at the issue around, obviously you were able to transcend, you had amazing support, but then back then, as it is till today, Bantu, coloured and Indian education was right at the bottom of the rung.
Yes.
So if you did go into a private schooling system or a Catholic school, you had to work very, very hard to almost be on par with your peers because they had a great starting line.
Yes, they did. And that's why I look to my mom really for instilling a culture of hard working and the values and the morals that I grew up with. Living in a township, you can imagine, we had a shebeen just opposite us, which went on nights and very long nights, and the challenges of having to study, even to try and fit in with my peers, was daunting. I mean, and I still had to come back from school and make sure that the house is clean and make sure that the food is cooked. When my parents come home, I ought to have done all that. So the only time that I really managed to focus on my schoolwork was around 3 a.m. in the morning when it was quiet. So I would be woken up. My mother would wake us up at that time and say, do your work. So I that's how I'm wired. Even now, I function better in the very early hours of the morning because I grew up that way.
So you're a nocturnal creature.
I sleep early and then yes.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go for our next ad break.
Okay.
And when we get back, we're going to get to the heart of the matter. Martha Ngoye is my guest. She is a whistleblower. And when we come back, we're now going to be unpacking all of the horrors that she experienced as a whistleblower. My guest is Martha Ngoye. She is a whistleblower. When she was Group Executive Legal Risk and Compliance finance and later acting chief executive for PRASA, she found herself fighting unlawful contracts that officials in government were trying to use to swindle the people of South Africa. That, of course, is you and I, honest, hardworking taxpayers. Martha, let's move on then with this very dark phase in your life. Let's just first go back to your mentor. How much of an impact did he make on you? Did he make you strong enough? Do you believe that what you learned with him brought you, including your parents, of course, brought you to the stage that you could take on giants like PRASA?
Yes. Had a lot of impact. And the fortunate part is that maybe also my character is such that I've always known that corporate governance, for instance, is my strongest forte. And when I see things going wrong, it just messes me up because of who I am and what I believe in. So yes, definitely, he did. And he was a no-nonsense guy. And that gave me the confidence. And when somebody helps you come out of that shell and say you can do it, it gave me the very confidence that said, you know what you're doing, you're competent to do the work. And if you work very hard, you will be able to succeed in everything that you do. So I've always been confident because I've known that I've never been given anything on a silver platter. I've had to work very hard to be where I am.
And I guess the important thing here is that you believed in yourself.
Yes.
You believed in yourself because your parents believed in you. And here you meet a white lawyer in the workplace, and he shows belief in you as well.
Yes.
So how can your confidence not go through the roof?
Went up yeah.
Talk to us about then when you left that company and you joined PRASA. Well, before PRASA, you joined Transnet. And your journey into horror began. How long were you there when when you started unraveling wrongdoing within the company?
Well, when I was given the opportunity, so I joined PRASA in 2011 as a group. And in 2011, I was rather working for their asset investment arm. And we were basically a think tank of PRASA at the time, and trying to, leverage on PRASA's assets and so on. So it was a very small team and we're very professional in doing the work. So when in 2014, when I was asked, because of my skill, to go and assist with the legal function, and to build it because they needed somebody to really, build that particular. I welcomed it because as a group executive as well, I can't just say I want to stick and be here. I knew that the potential of moving around the company would be there. So therefore, this was another opportunity for me to go back into my space and really contribute meaningfully to the organization, which I believed in. Because also the mandate of PRASA was very key and dwelt within me, because it was more about making sure that the poorest of the poor are looked after, especially where transportation is concerned. And we know what it's like with the apartheid era and how far our people lived to get to work early and so on. So all those issues really drove me to say we need to do better for our people, and we need to make sure that our people do not continue to be prejudiced. And that is why I think when I went in and realized that this is the opportunity I was given, it made me realize that we can't allow things to go pear-shaped.
When you joined Transnet and then moved on to PRASA, at that point in time, were things still functioning? Was there a reasonable level of corporate governance that one could believe in and say things are being done properly and correctly? When did the rot start setting in? And even before you respond to that, it's so sad. You're sitting here with me, you were a CEO at Transnet and PRASA, and we're sitting here with an absolutely dysfunctional public transport system as far as the rail system is concerned. Look what's happening on our roads because we don't have Transnet hauling goods from the ports to inland and vice versa,
Yes.
we're having the issue of looting and truck burnings on our roads.
Yes.
And the accident rates are sky high. So I've said a lot in that one statement, and I know you're going to
Yes.
respond very succinctly to all of that.
Well, when I was at Transnet, and I can safely say this and confidently say it, things were working very well.
And this was back in?
This was in 2006.
Right.
This was during Maria Ramos's era. So I worked in the legal function there as the legal advisor. And, the work was brilliant. What we did was meaningful, and you could see the changes that we were making as an organization to the government, and making sure that from a strategic perspective, the focus on freight, for instance, is there. And the type of contracts that we're entering into, we're making sure that we remove the trucks from the roads, right? And so that the rail can be used as a means of transporting, coal, iron ore, everything. We were on track at the time. And the rail system was functioning properly, and we still had the network, by the way, at that time. So we didn't have issues of the amount of vandalism that we've had now to the rail infrastructures was clearly not there at the time.
Can I come in here regarding the vandalism? We know it is directly due to all the corruption in high places that has led to the vandalism. What is it that we tell our people? Don't destroy our infrastructure. It is damaging you and our future generations. If we continue doing this, we won't have a country left to live in.
Look, I think it's deep.
Way too deep.
It's very deep. And people don't want to appreciate. I don't know whether it's not wanting to appreciate, but we don't want to deal with the reality of the situation. At PRASA, we advised, as the legal function, the board of PRASA then, not to cancel the security contracts because we didn't have a contingency plan. I was quizzed in Parliament about that many years ago. And I even said, this was the advice that we gave to the board at the time. And they didn't take it.
What was their reasoning for cancelling those security contracts? And those security contracts was taking care of the railway lines, railway stations, and all the infrastructure involved in a Transnet. And when you look now, there's probably a PRASA.
Yes.
There's probably nothing left.
Look, the reason they gave was the fact that the public protector then, Thuli Madonsela, had in her derailed report identified that these contracts were irregular. There's nothing wrong with that, and we accepted that. But however, what we said was the risks of cancelling these without having a contingency plan in place far outweigh, just wanting to just change things quickly and thinking that everything is going to be okay. And we knew that this was going to happen. We knew the exposure that would be there because already within the security sphere, we knew that the political players that were involved. So we really had hoped that the board would tread carefully around this thing. But the issue was, no, the public protector said this, and this is how we're going to do it. And look, we've understood also, obviously, it's always been very difficult within the organization to put together a security tender. So they always get scuppered somehow. And there's always non-compliance because there's fidgeting with suppliers and so on. So because we've had that experience, we knew chances of us being able to put a proper security tender in place on time, that it was not going to be feasible. And then we had requested that in light of that, we need to be sure that at least we've got the necessary protection to the infrastructure. We were not listened to. In fact, one of the things that transpired at the time, I found myself being suspended, being put on special leave, even when the organization didn't have policies relating to special leave. You couldn't tell people things that they didn't want to hear.
Okay, it's actually hair-raising stuff. And what you're talking about now doesn't only relate to PRASA. This is the rot that is set in right across the country at all government, state-owned institutions. And that is why we find ourselves in the rut that we do regarding Eskom. But we'll talk some more right after the ad break. Absolutely a harrowing story, right from the horse's mouth, excuse the pun. But Martha Ngoye is in studio with us. She's a whistleblower. She was with PRASA at the time that she was suspended because she spoke her mind. She saw issues around corporate governance. She saw things that was not right regarding tenders, you know, that word that goes around, tenderpreneurship. Well, this is the woman who blew the whistle on all of those shenanigans at PRASA. We'll be back in the final quarter hour to talk about her direct suspension and how it's impacted on her life and her family's life as well. And we're into the final quarter hour of our interview with Martha Ngoye. There just isn't enough time to unpack everything that both she and I would like to unpack on the show this morning, right here on Perspective. She's a whistleblower. She blew the whistle on people at PRASA. She was suspended. She fought long and hard to be reinstated, but she is here to tell her story. Let's fast track then. I'd love to go into more detail, but there just ain't enough time to do that. Talk about when you were suspended and subsequently fired. What happened then?
Well, I was fired in 2021, in January 2021, under the guise that my contract was a 5-year contract because I'm a group executive. I've never been on a fixed-term contract. I've always been a permanent employee. And what was interesting for me at the time was I realized that I was the main person that they wanted to get rid of. And when I raised the issue with the board to say, it's interesting that you fire me, and yet there are people other executives that have been there longer than me and they're still at work. How is that possible if I'm on a 5-year contract? So the 5-year contract for me was just a lie that was put out there to the media to say I overstayed my welcome at PRASA, and in fact, I was defamed quite extensively, you know, by the board to say I abused my powers within the legal department to not actually even advise the boards that were there at the time. I took advantage of the instability that was within the organization to not advise the board that I was actually on a 5-year contract when it wasn't the case. So obviously I went to court and we won the case and we were reinstated. The day after that, the board of PRASA appealed. Yet there was another colleague who was fired on the same basis. And she won her case. Her matter, same set of facts, her matter was not appealed. Mine was appealed. And I'm still waiting for the Labour Appeal Court to pronounce on the issue around my employment 5-year contract with PRASA. And PRASA could just only talk on technicalities in my case. But anyway, fast forward, we won. We were then reinstated because from a legal perspective, we then tactically knew what we needed to do. And the organization didn't have a choice, but they allowed us back in. But we were then immediately upon, and that allowed that we get paid, right? So when we went back to work, this was in April, the 6th of April in 2021, we were slapped with notice of intention to suspend. So we had to explain ourselves why we should not be suspended. We did it, but we were suspended anyway. And at that time, it was in the midst of the State Capture Commission. I mean, I was busy giving evidence at the State Capture. It was crazy for me to have been in an environment where I was now reporting to the State Capture on what had transpired within PRASA and having to deal with the trauma of having to go back to work, you know, and knowing that people do not appreciate the work that I was doing at the Zondo Commission. So,
and it must have been very uncomfortable for you because if you had gone back to that environment, people obviously, because it's the nature of mankind, is that they'd view very suspiciously. They'd rather believe the board of directors because they're above you.
Yes.
And they're also obviously sucking up to the board. So
let me tell you what the SIU investigators at PRASA said to me. Not only to me, it was in a meeting of other people as well. They were asked to then investigate me on a particular issue, together with a colleague. They come back to me. The leader of the investigation team says to me, and this is the SIU, says to me, Martha, why is it that every board that comes to PRASA wants your neck? And I said to them, well, I don't know. You are the investigator. You do your job. Maybe you can tell me why it is that that is the case. What did he come back and do? He gave a report, an unprofessional report, right? And that was to deal with exactly what you're saying. Because in my view, the SIU did not do their work. They aligned themselves with exactly what the board of PRASA wanted to hear. They didn't do it.
Because sadly, they're looking after their own backs, are they not?
Of course.
And as we sit and speak here, Martha, there is a target on your back, isn't there?
Well, there's always a target on my back.
How do you feel about it, and how do you protect yourself?
Well, by the grace of God, I survive, and that is my motto. I've got friends, I've got family who look out for me. And so far, I'm here. I'm not a babita, dear Quran, and I'm grateful for that. So you'll never know. It's still there because as you were going to speak about my suspension, I was cleared. I went through a disciplinary hearing. There were 6 charges that were leveled against me. PRASA could not prove a lot of those charges against me. The ones they laid evidence against, they were not able to prove. I was cleared of the wrongdoing through a process.
And still they haven't reinstated you?
No, they refused to reinstate me. They extended my suspension.
For how long?
I don't know.
Okay, so as we sit here, there's issues around trauma on yourself. I mean, it must have been a horribly traumatic time that you've been through. Your family have suffered as well. As I've just said, there's a target on your back. Any day, anytime, anywhere, you could be attacked. You could be killed.
Yeah.
How do you deal with all of this? And how do your family manage to get through every passing day?
This is the thing. We take each day as it comes. And it's just been, just amazing as to how it's really evolved, and I can't explain it. I'm very careful, obviously, with my life. I take, the risk issues. It's traveling at night and wondering where. I always tell people where I am. My daughter always knows where I am because I only have the one child. And she's always worried about me. She says, you're a risk to society, mommy. And if you don't answer your phone, then you really get me worried. I shouldn't have a child who worries about me as a parent. I should worry about them.
Absolutely.
But it's the other way around. She's very concerned about financially. She'd be like, Mom, I don't need this. When I know I have to do things for her as a parent, and I can't because we don't have the money, because of the huge legal fees that one has, and one has to pay out of one's pocket. It's a nightmare, and it continues to be such. Yeah.
And I know it's going to happen, you'll be vindicated totally. Will you be able to sue PRASA for all of your legal fees? And having said that, your message to other whistleblowers, knowing what happened to Babita Deokaran, you also live in that fear. That, I should imagine, is very off-putting for people who want to blow the whistle. Because currently they are talking about legislation for protection of whistleblowers and also to pay them for the information that they share. You didn't whistleblow because of payment. You did it out of pure morality and ethics. But going forward, what is your advice to other whistleblowers and all the other questions I've put to you?
Look, I think at the end of the day, people must do what is right. Because if they don't, we will continue to live in the state of flux that we find ourselves in. It's about the individual. If you know something, it's not going to be easy. And this is what I can say. It's never going to be easy for you to tell people things that they don't want to hear. But I think what is better now is that there are organizations that are out there that will assist. Civil society has been key to our survival and our ability to remain sane. Because you can't do this on your own. So now at least if somebody wants to go and whistleblow, at least there are avenues that are available that they can go to and say, this is what I'd like to do. How do I go about it? What assistance can I get? We didn't get that.
And what protection can you offer me?
But you see, when I did my work, I was just doing my job as a professional. I didn't go out there to be a whistleblower. I didn't. I was just a professional doing their work. But now the issue around speaking out and us being labeled whistleblowers has become so rife. I didn't go out to go get money, to be paid by the state to get money. That's not why I did it. I was doing my job. And now to have this legislation that suggests that, I don't know. All I want is that my bills must be paid. The medical expenses that I've had to go through, trying to survive, were huge. For the past 2 years, I've been ill and not being able to understand what was wrong with me. I had to leave, I couldn't go to psychologist anymore because my daughter needed the help. So, I had to balance all those issues out. So if you want to go and do it, understand the environment that you're putting yourself in, but also know that at least the whistleblower house is there. You've got the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, you've got Corruption Watch, you've got Defend Our Democracy. Those civil society, active citizens movement, they basically, what's the word, not inherited, but they brought me on board after hearing my story, and they said, we believe in you and we'll support you. So those avenues are there right now. If you know within you that you want to do the right thing, continue to do the right thing.
Absolutely. So we've almost run out of time. Your parting words to everyone watching and listening to us this morning. And in your heart of hearts, do you believe that the issues you raised at PRASA are being raised, or as we sit and speak, it's been swept under the carpet?
Well, Judge Zondo said it. A year after the Chief Justice, with respect, the year after the State Capture Commission, nothing has changed.
And that's the sad situation of South Africa, corporate politics, government institutions, and state-owned enterprises. Really very sad indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure, Martha Ngoye, to speak with you this morning. We wish you safety, we wish you love, we wish you protection by the Almighty. You carry on holding that flag up as high as you can, because I think you're an amazing inspiration to all of South Africa.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
And that's where we leave it today. Thank you indeed. Isn't she an amazing woman? And these are the type of people we're going to bring to you on a daily basis right here on Perspective. Thank you for watching. Till next Thursday at the same time. As always, it is Assalamu Alaikum and Khudafiz from me and the rest of the Perspective team right here on Hilaal TV.